We are 2 minutes early, so maybe we need to take a little break. I'm sorry, but we need to start on time. But we could perhaps say that for the next talk, which is bringing transparency to oocyte assessment, the importance of including confounders when building artificial intelligence-based support tools to quantify the oocyte viability. It will be presented by the last author, which is Christina Hickman from London, UK. And so AI being the hot topic now. I'm sorry, Christina, I have to wait for 2 minutes or something. If you want to, you can walk very slowly up the stairs. We were told that if we have some pause, the chairs can, tell a joke or sing a song or something, but I don't think you want that. I can tell a joke. Christina, I'm not sure if you were at the embryology session on PCC on Sunday.
No, I missed it.
It was said that before we start looking at artificial intelligence, perhaps we should start to look at the natural stupidity instead.
I like that one.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I feel like I should have asked ChatGPT to give me at least 3 jokes if I were, just in case my talk was early.
Yeah, next time we'll do that.
Next time.
Okay, what time is it? It's 9:30.
Yeah.
You have any jokes?
No.
Let's stretch it. We'll start 1 minute early. Yeah. Okay, so I will introduce you again. So Christina Hickman from London, United Kingdom. I didn't see the title here. So bringing transparency to oocyte assessment, the importance of including confounders when building artificial intelligence-based support tools to quantify oocyte viability. So I think we'll ask you to start.
Okay, well, thank you very much, all of you, to being here in the first session of the day. Thank you, Esri, for selecting this abstract for the talk. I do have conflicts of interest which are directly relevant to this talk. I am the chair of the AI Fertility Society. I'm also the co-founder of the ASRM Special Interest Group for Artificial Intelligence in Fertility. I am a founder for Ovum Care and the Chief Scientific Officer at APRICITY. I'm a lecturer on artificial intelligence in embryology at Imperial College London. And the one that's most relevant for today is that I'm the Chief Clinical Officer for Fairtility. So why do we want to assess eggs? Well, there are 3 main stages that we want to use egg assessment for. Firstly, for the egg freezers. They want to know, have I collected enough eggs? Do I need to go for another egg collection? Because they need to make that decision now when they're freezing, not later on, 10 years, 15 years later, when they're going to be warming. At that stage, having that knowledge is too late. Then we have the IVF patients. The IVF patients need to have the reassurance, we need to manage their expectations based on the quality of their sperm, the quality of their eggs, so that they understand what is happening next. This is very powerful to help them navigate, especially when they're doomed to receive bad news. So this helps them cope better in that scenario. It also allows us to personalize the clinical strategy, which is specific for their quality of egg. And then you have donation. Within the donation, we split eggs between recipients and donors. How do we ensure that both sides have equal chance of leading on to a live birth? So how do we assess eggs today? Well, naturally, the gut instinct that we have as an embryologist is to try and see what are the anomalies that we can visually interpret in the eggs. And we already have lots of publications on this, mostly from Thomas Ebner, Laura Rienzi, amongst others. And they have listed abnormal zona pellucida, abnormal shape, refractile bodies, vacuoles, granular cytoplasms, cirques. All of these are characteristics that we can see. But when we start thinking that we're supposed to be making our interpretations based on evidence-based medicine, when you look at the evidence, we don't have a rationale to be interpreting our prediction of oocyte viability based on these features. In fact, all of these which are in green, there is no evidence to suggest that we should be including that in our interpretation. The ones in blue, there is some statistical significance, but there's no clinical significance in using them in interpretation. And when you look at circs, for instance, where we do have evidence to suggest that this should be considered, circs only occur in 1% of your eggs. So now we start asking ourselves, is an ugly egg a bad egg? And the evidence suggests that that's not necessarily the case. So the next thing we can do is go, okay, so what about the good-looking eggs? What do we do with the good-looking eggs? Can we tell what good-looking egg will lead to a blastocyst and which one won't? And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm looking at these 4 eggs up there. I have the answer in the bottom, but when you look closely, they don't look that dissimilar to me. I couldn't tell them apart. There's many examples I can show you of different embryologists who try to quantify how well can we as embryologists predict which of these eggs will become a blastocyst and which ones won't. This is one example from Bear, from Stanford University. He presented here at ASHRI not that long ago. And he shows that it's pretty much, I might as well flick a coin, then look at the egg and make an assessment. So artificial intelligence is ideally suited for this type of problem. It can see things that potentially we can see. It can analyze every pixel in that image and start looking for patterns that we as embryologists might not be able to identify. The problem is that although we have several tools out there and several publications on how to use AI, I mean, by publications, they're mostly abstracts, we don't really have an assessment of how confounders contribute to this prediction of efficacy, of prediction of viability. So things like if you've taken the image before ICSI or after ICSI, did sperm quality get taken into account? We all know that sperm quality contributes to blastulation. It's not just about the egg. What about the patient age, the source, if it's donor or not? What about the morphology of the egg itself? And the reality is that the current methods involve you taking the dish with your eggs over to an inverted microscope and doing the assessment 1 egg at a time, which allows for human error to happen in terms of, have I assessed the right egg to the one that I have numbered 1, 2, or 3? You also have the challenge that you're outside an incubator, and we all know that eggs are extremely vulnerable to the environment. So we designed a study to assess how these confounders affect the ability of AI to predict blastulation based on oocyte images alone. We looked at oocyte donor age, we looked at oocyte dysmorphism, we looked at own eggs or donated eggs, so the source of the eggs, we looked at the quality of the sperm, and we looked at a comparison between an image taken before or after ICSI. So within this methodology, we were able to use an algorithm, or the Chloe OQ, or Chloe Oocyte Quality Insights, and we did this assessment twice, once before and once after the ICSI. This was all performed inside a time-lapse incubator. So this allowed for the eggs to be assessed within the safety of an incubator environment. And the individual wells within the incubator allowed the full traceability to be 100% infallible. The egg source, I have here the splits of each of the cohort groups that we analyzed, own or donated, the different age groups that we categorized. We use the HFEA cutoffs. And the sperm quality, we look at it in terms of how the clinic had categorized in terms of whether it was what we consider good quality sperm because it was donated sperm, whether it was normal spermic sperm combined with sperm donations, so we consider that a second layer of quality, or whether specifically the patient has been categorized as male factor or abnormal sperm samples were documented. First thing we noticed is that now I could tell the difference between the good eggs and the bad eggs more clearly, supported by a tool that gave me either a high or a low score. So it became clearer, the interpretation of which of those eggs were viable, which before I couldn't do. Next, we were able to identify that this information, we were able to use it as a biomarker. We actually put this is going to be a topic of a different talk, but I just wanted to introduce the concept that we could use the score of the egg as a way to monitor the different methods of stimulation, the different methods of egg collection practice, the different operators doing all the procedures that happen before the ICSI. We're also able to interpret that information to allow the patient to have access to that information. So they were able to see pictures of the eggs, have a report that fully explains what's happening, which helps build trust and empowers the patient. What about the numbers? Well, the first thing that was really interesting for me, I didn't expect to see this, was that we actually had a difference in OQ score between a pre-ICSI egg and a post-ICSI egg, and this reached statistical significance. So for me, there were two things going on here. Is this because there's a difference in the quality of the egg before and after? We were taking the very first image after ICSI. This was minutes after an ICSI procedure. There isn't really enough time for any of the biological aspects to start affecting the imagery of the egg. Next thing that we looked at was all of these factors which did not contribute towards the quality of the egg as assessed by the OQ score. So the egg source, the age groups, and another one that was surprising for me, the sperm quality was not a factor. We didn't just look at the impact on the OQ score, we also wanted to understand what was the impact on the efficacy of prediction. And none of these factors, the egg source, the age group of the sperm quality, contributed towards the efficacy of prediction from the OQ score of prediction of blastulation. However, pre-ICSI and post-ICSI did significantly differ from each other. So this, for me, reminds us that the post-ICSI was a lot more predictive than the pre-ICSI with regards to whether this egg would become a blastocyst or not. We also looked at other clinics. So we started with a single center. We have now expanded the project, and we have 3 different centers independent in different geographies to see how this particular tool generalizes across different centers. And as you can see here, it ranged from 21 to 40% improvement in prediction compared to random. Remember, previous studies have demonstrated that embryologists are below random. So the average was 22% improvement. So in summary, the AI tools are predictive of blastulation, but they should be built in a way that they account for these confounders. They need to take into account whether it's pre or post-ICSI images, especially if we're going to be using these tools for egg freezers. We found no evidence for sperm quality, oocyte source, or donor age to be considered as confounders, but this could be the case for this particular algorithm, as these were considered when the algorithm was built. We need to do further studies and other algorithms that are available in the market. Chloe OQ is predictive of blastulation and improves over random by 22%. Our ability to assess whether an oocyte will become a blastocyst or not. And we were able to demonstrate that this was the case in different clinics, in different geographies around the world. I'd like to thank Institute of Life in Greece, CRGH in the UK, and Alpha in Malaysia for leading this study, and also the Fairtility team who made this study possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Beautiful data. Questions?
Hello, morning. It's an amazing study. Hi, Burak Özkasım, Paralabs. So my question is kind of like mixed with comments. So I have a feeling the procedure itself is a confounding factor. But I think even you don't inject sperm, you will get the same results.
I agree with
Like
you.
mock-up ICSI, the procedural, I think it's like, I call it a normalization. So your eggs are normalized after ICSI. So for algorithms to run makes easier, I think.
Yeah, I agree there are other confounders to consider, so looking at different embryologists within, but in fact, this is why I introduced the concept of a KPI. I think this would be a beautiful tool for us to be able to see the difference between the egg qualities, if we're doing the assessment post-ICSI, and help this identify which are the embryologists that need further support. And I would actually predict that potentially this might be a more useful tool than degeneration. It might be a more sensitive biomarker. So it is definitely something that we'd be looking at. So not just to monitor the different clinical practices, but also the embryologist ICSI if this happened to be used post-ICSI. But especially if we do this pre-freeze and post-freeze, we can also use it to monitor our vitrification and warming capabilities. So the potential for a quality control and quality assurance is there. We haven't demonstrated it yet, but I do believe that would be the case.
So we have microphone 5 first, and we're running out a bit of time, so maybe a short question.
Peter Illingworth, Australia. This is certainly very interesting work, but it's only quite good. It certainly wouldn't allow you to set out what you set in your introduction, where you can allow women to identify whether they've frozen enough eggs. How do you think you'll get to that point?
Completely agree with you. It's the first step. But it is certainly better than right now, where all we're saying to the patient is, you've got an oval egg, and I think that's bad, which is currently what we hear embryologists say to their doctors. We don't have a rationale to be making those comments at the moment either, and they are happening in clinical practice. So at least now we have something that is a bit more data-driven. We will be expanding this further so that we'll be able to demonstrate in terms of post-warming, in terms of looking at specifically targeting the 3 objectives at the beginning. But certainly for the 3rd objective, in terms of splitting and chance of blastulation between the donor and the recipient, I do think we have a rationale there. Thank you.
Yes, please. No.
Hi, Christina, thank you.
No, sorry, we have microphone 2, and I don't think we have time for more questions after that. I'm really sorry.
Siamak Pasha from Canada. Thank you for nice presentation and good data. I have just 2 questions. One, for cytoplasmic maturation or nuclear maturation, do you have anything is looking for, because it depends on the time of stripping, maybe you're going to miss it.
Yeah.
The other for SER you have 2 different versions. For the hyperstimulation, young donors, you can see lots of SER, or in the older population, and you can see a different result for blastulation.
I love that question. Not that I don't love the others, I love the others too, but this one in particular, because we are now just thinking, going, what other confounders can we look for? And we certainly, the next step, we're definitely focusing on looking at not just the cytoplasmic maturity, which we could look with birefringence, for instance, but we could, well, that's nuclear maturity, but it gives an indication. Yes. But also we were wanting to make an assessment of the day of stimulation. How long were they stimulated for? Were they overstimulated or understimulated? What is the folliculogram profile that we see with these particular patients? And see how that impacts on the OQ score. So certainly we'd be very interested in any of you have any other biomarkers associated with the egg that we could cross-relate. Please come talk to me after, because I would like to expand this further. I believe in looking at the egg from different angles is the way to go. This is a very cool angle to look at, but all the previous speakers presented other options, and I'd love to hear some more, especially if there are markers associated with maturity of the cytoplasm. Thank you.
Okay, this is a quick question.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christina. Is your tool yet predictive of embryo grading, any level of embryo grading, or just viability?
So we do have the data for that in terms of so not just forming a blastocyst, but forming good quality blastocyst. I was kind of saving that for the next conference, but effectively there is a connection there as well. But we also want to make the connection between the OQ score, which is our egg score, and the EQ score, which is our embryo score. So we're certainly looking and building these connections and going beyond as well. So we certainly want to go all the way to live birth, ploidy, live birth, all the interims in the middle. But obviously, the further we go away from the egg, the more confounders we're going to have to control for. And this is the challenge that all of us face in any of these predictive tools.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We
Thank you
actually have 2 questions from the online as well, from Mr. or Mrs. Anonymous. And the first one is, can this be applied to conventional IVF?
In terms of the application for conventional IVF, the challenge we have here is that you'd have to strip the egg and then do the assessment. So I would say no, unless you're doing short IVF, which is a common practice, particularly I've seen it very commonly used in China, in Japan. It's not common in the Western side of the world, but if you're doing short IVF, then we could, because that would be no different to us doing the post-ICSI. But if you're doing an overnight IVF, that would be now a zygote assessment, so maybe that would be the ZQ, maybe that would be the next tool that we might be working on. But yes, not as useful for that.
And we have another one. This is the last one now. Thank you, Christina, for another fantastic topic. Did you consider different embryologists after ICSI? I assume how they do their ICSI, how they perform. Yep. If there are differences.
Yeah, so that is definitely something we're looking at. The particular data set that we collected didn't capture that. It just wasn't in the scope of this particular study. But this is certainly something that we're focusing on, particularly on the KPI side and the KPI objectives, not just the different practitioners, but also the different ICSI rigs, the different media they're using, the different oil they're using, the different brands of needles they're using. So we're certainly going to be expanding to all of these different contributors, and we think it could be a powerful tool for that as well.
Yeah, so that would be the embryologist score.
The embryologist score, yes.
Thank you very much. We'll move on. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, and the lecture